Do you think it's realistic to effectively tax billionaires in a way that still encourages innovation within America?
Yeah, I do. I happen to believe that we should not have billionaires. All right. So you want to get rich, fine, get rich. How much do you need? All right. Yeah. So I would have a very steep tax.
999 million.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Right. You want a billion? All right, maybe 900 million. But we want to change the culture around.
In today's video, Bernie Sanders absolutely blows Andrew Schulz's mind on lobbying and billionaires. Schulz tries to throw out that classic line about how taxing billionaires is somehow gonna hurt the economy or make them all leave the country. But Bernie, he doesn't flinch. He lays it all out, how Trump's beautiful tax cut plan was basically a love letter to the ultra-rich, and how billionaires are doing just fine while regular people are struggling to afford rent and groceries. This convo gets real fast, and watching Schulz try to keep up as Bernie drops facts is kind of amazing. So let's dive in and watch how Bernie Sanders shocks Andrew Schulz in this video.
You know, I talked to Bill Gates, did an interview with him on Netflix, and I said, Bill, you know, you're worth $1 zillion. Were you motivated as a young man with the dream that you become a zillion? He said, no. He said, I love computer programming. That's what I loved.
Right.
That was his passion. Then he ended up making huge amounts of money. So, you know, I don't begrudge people making a lot of money, but I think there should be a limit to how much you make. And also, and then getting back to economics, is we are looking at a nation today not only with massive income and wealth inequality, but incredible concentration of ownership. Want to hear a fact?
Yeah.
You got 3 Wall Street investment firms, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard,
Yeah.
who combined are the major stockholders in 95% of the corporations in America. Go look at your favorite corporation, see who owns it. It'll be one of those. Who's the major stockholder? They'll be there. What do you think about that? That's power.
What is the impact of that? Like, how is that power wielded?
It means that you have 3 entities with boards of directors who have significant control of every major corporation in America. What that means is, do they stay in America? Do they go abroad? Do they pay their workers a decent wage or they treat them like crap? That's what it means. Enormous power in the hands of 3 Wall Street firms.
So what's interesting is when you start to get any kind of money, they'll tell you, put your money in a Vanguard.
Yeah.
Is that good for America? Because it seems like to us, this is how you get to participate in capitalism.
Right. That's right. That's your retirement goes into Vanguard. But that's one thing. But the other thing is that Vanguard, State Street, and BlackRock have enormous economic power, which is not a good thing.
And they're not using it benevolently.
They're not. They're using it to make more money. So the issue is that we got to take a look at is we got to ask questions that I got to tell you in Congress is very rarely asked and in the media is very rarely asked. In the wealthiest country on earth, should everybody have a decent standard of living? Americans, yes and no.
Yes.
Some people will say, no, hey, it's a tough world out there. I'm sorry. I'm smarter than you. I work harder. My dad gave me a lot of money. You don't have it. Tough crap.
At least they're honest.
Yeah, that's what some people will say.
Yeah.
Most people will not say that.
Right.
Most people will say, you know what? Yeah, I don't think anybody should be sleeping out on the street. I don't think anybody should not be able to go to a doctor. That's what most people say. Okay? What does that mean in terms of practical politics? It means, among other things, that we need an educational system which is very strong, from childcare to graduate school. All right? You want to become, your dad wants you to become a doctor, but if you want to become a doctor, you may leave school $500,000 in debt. You know that?
Absolutely.
All right, does that make sense? We need doctors. Should we, as the richest nation on earth, say, good, you want to be a doctor, you want to be a nurse, you want to be a dentist, we need you desperately, tuition free. We love you.
Yeah.
Do it. Because we desperately
Subsidize it. Yeah, subsidize the absolutely. If we need more engineers, don't make the education so expensive.
Exactly.
We need it.
And we need more engineers.
First off, Bernie's central point is dead on. We're living in a country where just 3 financial firms, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, control significant ownership in almost every major US corporation. That's not a free market. That's oligarchy with a Wall Street logo on top. And Bernie's right to ask, if these firms can decide how companies treat workers, whether they ship jobs overseas, or whether they prioritize profit over people, should we really be okay with that kind of concentrated power? Bernie also brings up something crucial about higher education and healthcare. two systems that are so essential, yet so broken. He's not saying no one should make money. He's saying if you're in the richest country on earth, people shouldn't go bankrupt trying to become a doctor or get evicted because they got sick. And that's not radical. It's just common sense backed by data. For example, studies have shown that countries with universal healthcare and subsidized higher ed have stronger social mobility and healthier populations. Shocking, right? So when Bernie asks, should everyone have a decent standard of living, it's not a trick question, it's a gut check.
So, like, I wonder if there's a certain point in time where if you squeeze the consumers of your products so much, they won't be able to buy them. So isn't it in the best interest of these, you refer to them as oligarchs, but isn't it in the best interest of these oligarchs that they make sure that life is fruitful enough for the people that are going to consume their products?
That's a very good question. And I'm not sure that that's a legitimate question. I think a right question. I don't know that they think about it that way.
They talk about the markets all the time, but it's like the market's going to fucking decide for you, buddy. And eventually they're going to realize we can't buy a new iPhone every year. And then your iPhone sales tank. Or we could create a system that in some way is, I don't know, and again, this is way smarter than me to figure out, but like that is some way allowing people
slightly more equitable.
Yeah, it's just like making enough money. And I don't know if Henry Ford did this, but of course in the lore you always hear like everybody on the line could afford a car. Right? Like you would like to believe that everybody that is, working 40 hours a week can afford the average goods that the American consumer want to buy. I don't know how we do that. And I don't know if it's through taxation.
That is the debate. Good. And that is the honest debate that we should be having as a country.
And can we bring these billionaires, can we bring these oligarchs into that conversation? And they're clearly brilliant, right? Many of them. Obviously, there's a bunch of them that are just Nepo babies. And I'm curious your thoughts on like the Nepo babies, the trust fund kids who have taken along, taken up politics and are finger wagging at people who actually work for a living when they've never had a real job. I'm curious your take on them being so opinionated.
Yeah, well, I echo what you're saying. It's some of these folks were born with huge amounts of money, think that they have the right to be telling everybody else what they can be doing and have enormous power.
Now, Andrew raises a genuinely thoughtful point. Isn't it in the interest of billionaires, the so-called oligarchs, to make sure regular people have enough money to keep buying the products that make them rich in the first place? In theory, yeah, that's classic Henry Ford logic. Pay your workers enough so they can afford your product. But Bernie's not wrong to be skeptical, because in reality, corporate America hasn't exactly followed that principle in recent decades. Wages have been stagnant for most working class Americans, while productivity has skyrocketed. Since the late 70s, the average worker's pay has barely kept up with inflation. Meanwhile, CEO pay has exploded by over 1,000% during the same period. That's not a system that cares whether consumers can afford iPhones or rent. That's a system that's about squeezing every drop of workers and consumers for short-term shareholder gains. At the end of the day, Bernie's message is clear. Yes, let's have an honest debate. But that debate should start with this question. Should people who work 40 plus hours a week still struggle to afford rent, healthcare, or education in the richest country on earth? If the answer is no, then the system isn't working. That's not radical. That's just reality.
The hyperinflation of college tuition is something that you don't hear talked about a ton. But growing up in a family where the more degrees you have, the more respected you are, it seems as though it's getting to the point where you brought up where the product is not worth the cost. College, having an undergraduate degree, it's not worth how much you're going to make in the long run. If we're not at that point, we're getting very close.
Yes.
Is there a solution to that? What would you say to that? I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I happen to think that education itself is something that should be a lifelong pursuit. My wife tells me this every day. I mean, and I don't mean to be romanticize it, but, learning is a pretty good thing, Yeah. And I tell my grandchildren that, in school sometimes almost discourage them from learning, They got rote things. I hate school, Grandpa, So I think learning is important. And I think we probably have to, in this day and age, revolutionize education. But I personally believe in my soul is if you want to get a graduate degree, we need you. And you shouldn't be going in debt. There should not be impediments. We got to figure a way to fund it. But bottom line is anybody, I want to say to every kid in America, you're interested in physics, you're interested in science, you're interested in engineering, you're going to do it. I don't care what your income is. We will, in one way or another, you're going to achieve that. And you know why? Because as a nation, we need you.
Yeah, absolutely.
You hear a lot of these people saying, especially folks that are attached to these big corporations, like America doesn't have enough engineers, and America doesn't have all these things, so we have to go higher abroad. It's like, well, I don't know, maybe if you had access to billions of dollars, there's something that you could do to make sure that we could grow them here. Now, I'm not putting that 100% on them, but you would hope that there would be some sort of benevolence that would recognize a problem here.
Not benevolence, it's self-interest.
Ooh, so reward their own selfishness.
We need engineers.
Yeah.
All right. We need people who know how to build tunnels.
Yeah.
All right. In case you haven't heard, there is a climate crisis. All right. How do you transform our energy system? Easier said than done. We need some really, really smart people to figure out how we create cheap, sustainable energy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I will send you to graduate school.
Thank you.
Dearly.
Yeah.
He needs it.
We need
badly.
you. We need you. And that's what we should be thinking about as a nation.
And as far as subsidizing that, do we have room in the budget? And where's the best place to pull it from?
Subsidize. What does that mean? So we're subsidizing this bill right now, the so-called reconciliation bill, Trump's big, beautiful bill. We got 200 in the House. The Republicans are putting in $235 billion over a 10-year period to go to the top 0.2%. So if your billionaire father is going to leave you money, the exemption is now up to a married couple of $30 million that you don't have to pay any taxes on. So this goes to the top 0.2%. Do we have enough money? This is what you got to get in your head. We have enough money in this country to do any goddamn thing you want to do. In this particular budget, we're now spending $1 trillion on the military. They want to spend $150 billion more. We're spending more than the next 9 nations combined. So what we're doing is giving tax breaks to the rich, spending more money on the military, and then we're going to cut Medicaid. So the way in this country, literally, and by the way, when I say these things, they're not radical ideas.
So this was one of those rare podcast moments where real policy meets barbershop style conversation. And Bernie Sanders absolutely brought the heat on the Flagrant podcast. The guys who lean a little right but generally seemed curious asked him a super fair question. Is college even worth it anymore, considering how insanely expensive it's become? Bernie didn't dodge. He basically said education shouldn't be some luxury good you only get if you're rich. It should be accessible, affordable, and yeah, even free, especially if you're pursuing something society actually needs, like engineering, medicine, or climate science. And he's right. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, student loan debt in the US has ballooned to nearly $1.8 trillion. And what do we get for it? Jobs that barely pay enough to cover rent, let alone student loans. Bernie also brought up a killer point most folks miss. We do have the money to fix this. While billionaires get tax breaks and the Pentagon racks up over $850 billion a year, we're out here arguing over whether or not a kid can afford community college. Make it make sense. And as Bernie said, this isn't some radical socialist fantasy. Most people agree that if we have the money to drop bombs, we've got the money to build classrooms. Simple as that.
Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out ground news in the description down below.